going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of One Saga and One Tale. I'm your host, Teddy Grenely, and we have four very, very exciting guests with us today. First, we have Rowan Laine, our resident Viking historian. Then we have UC Berkeley professor Eric Baisler. Then we have Connor Wallace, who is of Nordic descent, hailing from Reykjavik, Iceland. And last but certainly not least, we have Kelby Pintard, who is the head of the Icelandic Studies Department at Harvard. Guys, thank you so much for having us here today. We're really excited to talk about Hrafn's Saga and the tale of Thorstein's Staffstruck. So seriously, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks so much for having us.
Alrighty, so, it's great you guys are here. Let's start to kick things off. Just wanted to first kind of touch base and honestly just wanted kind of your thoughts and opinions on the saga and the tale, upon first read and, from your familiarity with it. I know personally, I think they're both very interesting. I do enjoy the Hrafn's Saga a bit more better. It piques my interest more as it really is, there's clear character development. It's cross-generational, and there's a lot of really great important themes that, of course, we're going to touch on later in this podcast. So first we'll start out with Ro, our resident historian. Ro, what are your thoughts on the pieces?
Well, I personally agree with you here, Teddy, because I like the saga more so than the tale as well. I personally found the tale a little bit confusing, which, as you know, as a historian, that can be rather rare. However, I kind of agree in the fact that the saga was longer. I thought I was able to implore more of the themes that you see across many of the sagas, which I'm glad you're excited to discuss further throughout this podcast.
Excellent. Very interesting. Professor Baisler, what do you think?
I really agree because I think the length of Hrafn's Saga, you got to see a lot more character development than the other tale because you get to follow Hrafn through his rise and fall and then eventual rise again to power. And just the way that entire journey changed him, and that just gave it more depth than the tale of Thorstein's Staffstruck.
Absolutely. And now our resident Icelandic person, Connor Wallace. What are your thoughts? I'm sure you got a lot to say.
Well, I agree with you guys on the fact that the character development is very big, but in my opinion, I like the tale more because it's really cool how Thorstein has the odds stacked against him, especially when the two hands, the farm hands of come to kill him in a surprise attack, and he gets jumped 2v1 and he ends up protecting himself and defeating them both. And this made me feel that my ancestors were strong and capable of defending themselves and overcoming great odds, and it just shows that they're powerful, and it makes me feel good about my heritage.
Totally. That's a great point. There's so many strong characters throughout Icelandic literature. And Kelby, how about you?
Well, as a female in the Icelandic department, I enjoyed Hrafn's Saga more because it was nice to see a strong female character voicing her opinion and standing up for what she thought and calling Hrafn out for his actions, which led him to go back and take back what was his. Right.
And, unfortunately, kind of due to the caste system and social trends, that is very rare to see a strong kind of female character.
Yes, good representation.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, Teddy and Kelby, I kind of disagree with you guys here because I believe there's just as a present female character in the tale of Thorstein's Staffstruck when Bjarni's wife actually calls him out for letting people kind of talk negatively behind his back, and then he responds with, quote, "Now Thorstein from Sunnydale and I are going to settle this matter of honor." So I kind of feel like she also changes his course of action similar to the way they do in Hrafn's Saga.
Very good point. But personally, I connected with the female character in Hrafn's Saga a little bit more. That's why I thought I would touch on that first.
I kind of agree with you, Rowan. I think that her forcing him into going and confronting Thorstein really influences what they're trying to do. She really forced him into action, and then he had to take part because if he didn't, he would seem less of a man in front of his wife and the people around him.
But in Hrafn's Saga, when the female calls him out, that causes him to go take back what was his, and he wants to keep his honor with that and not seem so submissive.
That's true. I think in both scenarios, a kind of female propels her man or the guy in charge to go do something that he wasn't going to do previously.
Yeah, they definitely both add a lot of value to the story.
Absolutely. Guys, these are really great discussions, so let's keep them coming. You know, Kelby, you mentioned something a little bit about honor, and I just kind of want to circle back with that. That is, in fact, you know, a very important theme kind of through and through the saga and the tale. Me personally, I think that one of the best examples of honor in Hrafnill's saga is kind of Hrafnill's affinity towards honoring Friar, right? He's doing all these things. He's making all these sacrifices. He kind of built his whole settlement around his religion and his, you know, he wants to be as honorable towards Friar, the god that he has, you know, kind of willingly given himself to.
I got kind of a different message from both of the sagas than you did, but I think that both of the sagas are saying how honor is more important to them, more important than doing the right thing, because neither Hrafnill or Thorstein seem to get any joy out of their killings, but because they gave their word that they would kill him, they feel that they have to follow through or their honor will be tarnished.
Right.
I also got kind of a different thing. We see honor in both of them, but this means either like keeping their pride by killing something or someone, and as we see in Hrafnill's saga, Hrafnill kills Einar for riding his prized horse, but this shows that Hrafnill holds his honor very high and doesn't want people to disrespect him, and he will do anything for that.
Professor Baisler, I actually totally agree with you here because like Hrafnill even says that he would have forgiven Einar in a regular circumstance, but because it would tarnish his honor and he spoke it and made it his word that if anyone rode his prized horse, he would kill them, he has to kill Einar, even though that's not necessarily what he wants to do. So I agree with you there, buddy.
I completely agree, Rowan. I also think that Hrafnill didn't want to kill Einar, but because he told people that if someone did ride his horse or touch it, that he would have to kill him. In this instance, like, he gave his word out loud, like you said, and if he didn't follow through with this, it would ruin his reputation, and people wouldn't be, like, as respectful of him, because, like, he's always followed through with everything he says, and people see that as, like, I don't want to cross him, otherwise he'll act upon it, and if he makes it an exception for Einar, then he'll make an exception for anybody else, and I just think that he had to follow through with it in order to keep his reputation up.
Absolutely, and that kind of, you know, very well said. It circles back to how, you know, he's dedicating his life to this patron deity Friar, you know, his horse, Freyfaxi. It's the whole reason they can't ride it is because, you know, this is like the god's livestock. It's his most prized possession. And, but yes, everything you said is super, super valid. And these are great discussions, guys. I'm glad to have you guys on the show. Let's keep it going. It's really interesting how we, you know, kind of transition from honor to horses and livestock because, you know, like Freyfaxi, there actually are some very, very curious parallels between Hrafnill's saga and the Tale of Thornstein Staffstruck, as horses end up being kind of the main catalyst for the whole stories in general and the series of events that follows. And there clearly is some you know, importance to these animals and kind of livestock in general, whether it's a currency or, you know, it's a companionship thing. So what are your kind of thoughts on the horse and how kind of themes throughout, motif, if you will, throughout these two stories?
Well, I agree with you here, Teddy. The horses and the livestock definitely play a huge role in both of the stories. Like in Hrafnill's saga, like the horse causes a conflict in the first few pages of the entire story that pretty much cause every other event, and like you said, it totally acts as a catalyst. And then in the Thorstein Staffstruck, the horse fight, which is just two animals fighting, eventually leads to multiple deaths and the rest of the story as well. And they both play very vital roles in the contents of the story. And I agree, the livestock and the horses are very valuable and very important to both stories.
Right. Kelby, you look like you got something to say.
Like you said, the livestock being kind of a guide for the story. The main reason that Enar gets on Faxi is because he loses Raphnel's sheep. So I feel like that's kind of the main reason why he gets on the horse and why he gets killed. So.
Right.
Well, Teddy, when you invited us on the show and you told us which tale and which saga we were going to be discussing this week, it was really interesting to me because I remembered that both of these kind of started with the horses and the issues around them, and how like one of them started with a horse fight, and once someone disrespected one horse, then they retaliated and kind of escalated from there. And then in Hrafnel's case, when he ended up riding the horse and it was Hrafnel's prized possession and he had to act on it, and it's just interesting how both stories like started with the horse and ended up in death, and that way just relayed how important these animals actually were to them back in this day. And it kind of relates to now, like even with your pet dog, if someone were to hurt your dog, you wouldn't appreciate that, and you'd want to do something that would like make up for it.
Right, and that's totally true and consistent. Naming the horse in Hrafnel's saga, even just the name, the Faxi, that's a direct take off of the deity Freyr, which is the patron god that Hrafnel is trying to please. So even bestowing that kind of honor and that kind of high level of respect of his prized deed really shows this kind of highlights and emphasizes the special bond they have. Professor Baisler?
Yeah, kind of going off of that, I agree with you all about how the horses each shape the story, but I think it's interesting to look at how the horses are treated differently in the saga and the tale, because while in one, they're used as a form of more entertainment and they're made to fight each other, but in Hrafnel's saga, he even refers to his horse as his foster child, and I just think that that's something interesting to consider when thinking about the roles of horses in the story.
Absolutely.
Reflecting back on what you said earlier, Eric, about the rise and fall of Hrafnel, why do you guys think he became a better goalie after he lost all of his power and had to sort of rebuild himself up again?
That's a great question, and of course you can ask questions even though it is my podcast. But going through this adversity, right, when when Thorbjorn tries to gain kind of the support of his brother, he doesn't accept it. He goes to his son Samur, and Samur eventually becomes the goatee and puts spares Hrafnel's life, so he's his subordinate until he retaliates, etc., etc. Going through kind of that process of taking power away from him and having to build it back up kind of highlights and emphasizes this change and like character development he goes through from being I guess a great word is zealous, being very zealous towards Freyr the god and doing everything for the higher power, and kind of shifting that towards now he has this kind of newfound respect for his subordinates and his men, since he has now had time to be a subordinate himself. Instead of getting power really quickly by being an incredible dueler and whatnot, he's seen what the other side looks like, and now he can really emphasize. And that kind of helps him develop to become a much stronger, and in my opinion, a much better leader.
I totally agree with that. I think he's a way better leader now because losing all his power to Samur humbled him, and like you said, it gave him more of a new outlook on his world from the other side, and he could use that when he regained power again to better rule his people because he understands them a lot more.
Exactly.
Going off of what you said about humbling, I personally think the female character who called him out pushed him to realize what had happened to him, and had this character not been there, he would have lived his days as a man with a tarnished honor.
Yeah, I kind of agree with all you guys here. I think he had been at the top for so long, he didn't really realize the power that he could and did lose, because if you're the top dog for long enough, you're going to forget what it feels like to be the underdog. And like you said, Teddy, once you kind of get that feeling back, you want to kind of change your way to improve and be a better leader. I think he was definitely humbled by Samur, and he knew that if he didn't make this change, that the same thing could potentially happen again, and after experiencing it once, he didn't want to risk experiencing it again. And like Kelby said, I think without the strong female character in place that was there to push him, he wouldn't have made this change and developed
Right.
overall as a character.
Exactly. So, Connor, your ancestors kind of went through something in terms of the same kind of hierarchies in society. So, really interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, the reason I kind of interjected and asked this question was, like, I think what you guys all talked about, like his rise and then his fall and his rise back again, like humbled him and whatnot. But I think something that you guys missed out on a little bit was when he lost his chieftain and went down to like where he hasn't been before, he also lost a lot more. Like, he realized that they ended up killing his horse, which was his prized possession, and got him in this mess in the first place.
Right.
As well as they burned down his worship temple. And at that point, he kind of stepped back and was like, I don't really want to worship a god anymore. Like, this is how I ended up. And he kind of did like a self-reflection and changed all of his thoughts. And he's like, I want to be back where I was. I want to be able to help people. I want them to like me as a good leader because I help them, not because they fear me. And that's kind of what I asked the question. And that's kind of my thoughts about it.
I agree, Wallace. I kind of think he definitely did lose more than what you kind of see on the surface level with just his chieftaincy. He definitely hit rock bottom, and I think that he knew that if he didn't make any changes, then he would just be right back at rock bottom.
Right. Guys, this is great conversation. Yes, feel free to ask any questions going along. And for the viewers listening at home or whatever, don't worry. We will touch on the tale of Thorstein Staffstruck. It's just usually how these episodes go is these sagas are much bigger and larger and have more kind of to say. So we go a little deeper in those. But thanks, guys. Great work.
Yeah, so kind of touching back to Thorstein Staffstruck, I think we see a similar situation, but not quite to the same extreme. Because you see Bjarni has his honor tarnished in a similar way, like Hrafnel, but not quite to the same extent. But he still has to take a rather drastic action to gain his honor back, and in his words, receive compensation, which you see throughout the story is having Thorstein serve him.
Also, another similarity is that strong female character, but also not as extreme because his wife talks to him and makes him realize that he has to get his life back on track.
Something that reflects back to my lineage is the acquisition of nicknames that a lot of characters in these sagas and tales seem to form. For example, in this tale, Thorstein got his nickname Thorstein Staffstruck from the issue with Thord in the beginning, where he was actually struck by Thord's horse prod, which cut his head open. People get nicknames based off these simple scenarios and they just stick. He literally got his name for being stuck by a staff.
That's very interesting, Connor. They should call you Connor Well-Read because it sounds like you've read up a lot of your sagas, and it's very good. Guys, this is kind of nearing the end, unfortunately, of this episode of One Saga, One Tale. I just wanted to thank you guys each individually for coming out. I feel as though having 4 people specifically has been really, really vital to get kind of different perspectives and a kind of a diversity of knowledge rather than one individually, as we're talking about works of art and literature and not necessarily your personal experience, but rather the framework you use to assess and synthesize these works of literature. So just once again, thank you guys so much for coming on, and I'd love to hear kind of some closing final thoughts, feelings, opinions on themes in general or anything specific in the saga or the tale.
Well, Teddy, I just want to say thanks for having us out.
No
I think
problem.
we all really enjoyed this experience. And I think it's just really important to recognize the themes that are not only present in both of these sagas, but they definitely permeate a lot of sagas that Connor has definitely read. And I think it's just really important to acknowledge those.
Right.
Well, thank you. I may or may not have read a little bit, but yeah, it's definitely a great opportunity to come here and hear other people's voices and opinions on the tale and sagas that we've all read, and kind of see different perspectives, how themes came across to them that may differ from your own. And I just think it's 2 great reads, and I would recommend them to anybody out there who hasn't read them. And it's just great to see the lineage of our past in Scandinavia, and just a great thing to to reach and develop more on.
Yes, like both of them said, thank you very much. I thought it was very, very interesting hearing different opinions from all these very amazing people that have different career paths and what they think about the sagas.
Yeah, I got nothing else to add. Thanks for having us on the show.
Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. To everyone listening at home, in class, or elsewhere, just once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Next week's episode, we're gonna have Chris Hemsworth out from the Marvel movies, and he's gonna talk about kind of a song and a tale and give his perspective kind of as an actor trying to portray someone involved in Nordic tales. So once again, we got a great episode coming up, but thank you guys so much. It's been a blast.
Thanks, Daddy.
Thank you for having us.